Welcome to the Real Chili Podcast.
And the Golden Eagles of Marquette University in Milwaukee are bound for the Final Four for only the third time ever.
5 seconds left. Marquette down by one, trying to avoid the upset. Blue the drive, the left hand. It's good. 1 second to play. Vanderbilt has put Marquette in front by one.
And I want to win every day as basketball players, as students, and I want to win every day, most importantly, as people.
Welcome, and ladies and gentlemen, to the Real Chili Podcast. I'm your host, Mike Lavender. This is episode 2 of the Real Chili Podcast. Today I'm joined by some of the fellas, Eric Pond, Pete Mohan, Pete Neighborworth, and Brian Henry. Coming to you today, there's been a lot going on over the past few weeks for Marquette basketball. We've had Marquette Madness. There's also Big East Media Day last week, Tuesday, October 11th, in which Marquette was picked as a preseason number 7 to finish in the Big East. So we've got a lot of things to cover here. And we want to start it off with some of the more exciting news that happens every year, which is always fun to get the new students and returning students involved, and that's Marquette Madness. It was just a couple of weeks ago, and there are a number of highlights, some positives, and certainly some things to discuss. And I think far and away the biggest thing that happened at Marquette Madness was the unveiling of the new Jordan brand uniforms that Marquette's going to be wearing. If you haven't seen them yet, which I'd be shocked if you're listening to this and you hadn't, but if you haven't seen them yet, they're form-fitting. The ones we've seen so far are navy blue. They've got a bumblebee stripe down the side, and maybe most notably, the number is listed above Marquette. I think they're pretty sweet.
I like them a lot. I like the incorporation of the different eras of Marquette basketball, which is a tough thing to do, first of all, to get all of those different unique jerseys throughout Marquette basketball program history kind of combined into one. I think they did a pretty good job of that and not make it look too busy, which I think it's almost there. There's a lot going on, but I think they did a tasteful job with it. The only thing I would have to say is that, like, watching some clips of Marquette Madness, is that the V is so low on their chest. There's a lot of chest. You see a lot of chest on these guys.
It's provocative.
It is.
It is legitimately a tank top. Is essentially what the primary jersey is, and that's, from what it looks like, that's going to be in all 3 or 4 different uniforms that they have for different colors. That's going to be the primary look. I'm with you. It's really interesting. I'd say this: when they first came out, my initial reaction, it wasn't a visceral, "Oh, this is terrible." I kind of went, that there's a lot going on there. As I've looked at it,
They're sharp.
Like, I've come around. I do think for trying to incorporate years of ridiculous-looking uniforms that we've had, and let's be honest, like, Marquette's had some...
How dare you, Brian?
Well, fun. Like, we all love them, but, I mean, they are pretty out there compared to everybody else. I thought they did a pretty good job with it. I love the belt, using the siding from our previous uniforms, how that's kind of right on the center, and then they keep the bumblebee theme down the sides. I think they're really sharp. I think they did a nice job with them, considering all they were trying to accomplish and get in them to pay tribute to the history of the program in their uniforms. Yeah,
let's be honest. These jerseys pay more homage than the Three Wise Men did. I mean, it's on that level.
Well done.
Well, who's bringing the myrrh? Which of our players is bringing the myrrh, though?
If we're going to lead the league in something this year, it's going to be homage.
Oh, absolutely.
I think my gripe with these jerseys is that they're maybe not as instantly recognizable as jerseys past. Like, I get it, there's a lot of elements to weave in here, and I think they did a great job. It's more of a classic design, but it actually doesn't seem as colorful or unique as kits in the past. I was a little disappointed by that.
And we saw that on Twitter. I think day of, there was a image that was floating around and which showed the striking similarity to Cal's uniform, which aside from a couple token differences, they were like the same thing.
Yeah, Michigan too, a fellow Jordan school. I think that's another one that might be hard to tell apart.
We still haven't seen the other colored jerseys yet, though, right?
That's true.
We've only seen the navy
right.
ones, so I guess we don't really know how the white, the gold, and the championship blue jerseys will end up looking with their individual details. But the thing that stood out for me was, and you guys kind of mentioned the form-fitting nature everyone's jersey is custom fitted. Someone mentioned the tank top design, which is kind of the opposite of the trend that was going towards the soccer style jerseys with Adidas and the NBA. And, that kind of had a negative reaction in public, trying to force the sleeve jerseys on guys. And I think Jordan, as a trendsetter in basketball, is trying to separate from that Adidas soccer-style basketball jersey and go back to sort of the roots of, like, original basketball jersey design.
I think kind of bottom line for uniforms is that we're all, we can go back and forth, and you see people on Twitter and different blogs debating the merits or lack thereof of uniforms. The bottom line, if the kids love them, great. I think that's really what it comes down to, and we saw on Twitter, at least Dwayne Wilson loved these uniforms. So as long as the kids love them and they can play in them and they have that full range of motion in their shoulder, that's the most important thing. So someone mentioned that one of the things these uniforms did was harken back to past Marquette uniforms and kind of past highlights that we've seen in uniforms. Another thing from Marquette Madness that did the same thing was they revamped the 2008 Prey video, which is not only one of my favorite Marquette videos of all time, it's one of my favorite sports videos of all time. But that thing still gives me chills when I watch it today, to hear Jarrell McNeil at the end tell me to pray. I'm listening to him. I'm praying when he tells me that. So they did a remake. I thought it was a pretty good remake. I mean, it's hard to capture lightning in a bottle twice, but they did a good job.
Yeah, Pete, Worth here. I think they did a good job. It was a little slow getting into it because there's like 30 seconds of build-up, whereas the 2008 video was just right away. And then also, two things that I stood out to me. One was they switched the line from "you will know that you messed up" to Jarrell says something like, "You will know that today is not your day," and I really loved that. You will know that you messed up. Like it was just kind of random and simple, and it was like Jarrell's out there like, "Yeah, Eric Devendorf, you just dribbled it out of bounds. You will know that you messed up." Today is not your day is just, I don't know. I didn't like that line as much.
Maybe they should have gone after the Unforgivable style and said, "Today ain't your day." That would have had a little more impact,
We don't endorse that video here on the Real Chili Podcast.
I'm interested to see more versions of this. It sounds like Brian Harden, who's the deputy athletics director at Marquette, tweeted that more versions will be released this year with additional alumni. So I'm excited about that. I know Bo Ellis was featured in that version that was shown at Marquette Madness. Does anyone know who the other couple guys were? I think we need to crowdsource some answers here.
So who are you're referring to, Eric, is the two old white dudes. We don't know who those are.
That's exactly right. Yep.
Because I spent like a half hour trying to look through to see if they were old coaches or old players, and I couldn't figure out who they were. So we need to figure that out.
Anyone think one of them was Don Kogis?
Yeah, Don Kogis was the name I looked up, because I looked through the new revamped Marquette basketball page, and they have all their All-Americans posted.
Did anyone else have to pinch themselves and remind them that Jerry Wainwright isn't still on staff?
Was he ever, though?
Yeah. Great point.
I have to say this about the video. I'm with you on. I was fully, thrilled to see him remake it. I had a lot of fun with it. I was more interested on the highlights they were going to decide to put in it, and I got a hint. Two of my favorite dunks that got me most fired up watching that video was the Dwight Burke tip slam against Georgetown from the 07-08 season, and then 2 years later, Lazar Hayward absolutely posterizing, I can't even remember the kid's name, from West Virginia on that fast break. I thought those were...
Pittsnoggle?
Yeah. It wasn't Kevin Pittsnoggle. Solid name drop. Mike Gansey, quality team when John Beilein took him to the Elite Eight. Who did they upset that year in the Sweet 16? Wake Forest and Chris Paul. Moving on.
And then got wrecked by Louisville.
Yeah, I thought those two dunks were just fun to see in the way they mixed in different highlights throughout over the different years.
Speaking of dunks, can we just say that Sandy Cohen was the only one able to complete a dunk at Midnight Madness, and therefore he was crowned champion.
And might be this year as well.
Hashtag end the dunk contest.
Yeah, all dunk contests.
So moving to a more positive contest that took place at Marquette Madness was the 3-point contest. There were 4 participants in the men's side of the three-point contest. They were all people who did not take the floor for Marquette last year. Andrew Rousey, who Eric profiled and we talked about on the first episode of the Real Chili podcast, won the three-point contest, not only within the men's team but also against the women's champion as well. Caton Reinhardt, Sam Hauser, and Marcus Howard also competed in the three-point contest. And so, we talked to you all last time about how the additions that Wojo is trying to make to the roster are to get more shooters. I think, encapsulated in the three-point contest, that's what we've seen. So you can't draw too much from a three-point contest, but it's good to see that our new players can shoot the ball.
Going to your point on not a single player from last year's team being involved in the three-point contest, I don't think any of us are shocked by that. And I believe you laid that out.
But it merits mention.
Yes, it absolutely merits mention. And I'm glad that was hopefully addressed in the offseason. Obviously, we'll find out. That was a big part of our first podcast. I'm sure we'll talk about it plenty more. We need guys to put the ball in the basket from further than 8 feet away.
Not to mention, Wojo was caught mentioning that he thought Sam Hauser is going to serve a pretty decent role this year. So, hey, reading the tea leaves.
I saw that mentioned.
Not the sweet tea leaves, though. Those were from a few years ago.
Hey, we'll get into the Georgia preview later, all right?
And so did Wojo mention specifically why? Did he mention because of his size or a combination of things? I didn't get a chance to read those comments.
Well, his mom usually brings pretty good orange slices at halftime, so I think that's kind of part of it. But, no, I think size definitely has something to do with it, considering he's, after Helt and Fisher, the second or the tallest guy.
Well, the thing that struck me right away is how excited Wojo got, and if you want to call it, I don't know, it seemed like almost a little too much, like a little contrived to me.
It was a little excessive,
especially when he almost trampled over those cheerleaders sitting on the right below the sideline.
Hard to tell if that passion and fire and energy, was just drummed up and sort of thrown out there for the moment, but that's the kind
Isn't part of that the floor slapping Wojo anyway?
Right.
A little over the top.
Right, and that's the kind of program defining, character that we could probably use to see a little bit more this year.
In the limited podcasting that we've done, I think if there's one flaw that we've identified overall from the past few years, it's the need for an identity and more passion and more competitive spirit. And if Wojo, who certainly displayed that throughout his career, can kind of bring that to the team artificially through doing something like that and through bringing it every day in practice, great, I'm all for it. It did seem a little contrived to me, but he didn't cut himself short. He's standing up on the table screaming. I loved it just from that standpoint that he's comfortable here now, right? Like you wouldn't do that in your first year.
I think, manufactured or not, he genuinely seems more comfortable in his own skin, in his role. I think sometimes we forget or maybe have to remember that he's a first-time head coach, which maybe makes him a little bit less likely to, show some color and let loose publicly for fear of losing some of that stoic, authoritative image, maybe. I thought it was a good, fresh look for him, and I was excited to see it. Lots of "we are" chants from him, too. The timing maybe seemed a little off on some of those at certain points, so I think he's going to hit his "we are" stride by the middle of the year, so I'm excited to see that come back.
I think the marketing department is just glad at how much content he generated.
Right.
Got to fill out that website.
A lot of tweetable material.
Oh, absolutely.
All right, so
GIFs everywhere.
So before Brian Henry rolls his eyes anymore, let's move on here to the next segment, and something we want to do from time to time is get questions from Twitter followers, and we got a few over the past few days when we reached out, and this one comes directly from at @GoldenEagles_MU, and wanted to hear what we thought. And by the way, fellas, our tagline, at least as I've said it recently, is answers not promised, but banter guaranteed. So no pressure here. Wanted to hear our thoughts on the starting lineup, and I thought this made sense kind of based on our brief discussion of Marquette Madness. What do you guys see as being the starting lineup when we take the court against Vanderbilt? So this isn't something that you need to predict through the end of the season, because obviously there's going to be changes and people are going to step forward. Who do you see as being the starting five come November 11th against Vanderbilt?
Well, I think we got 3 guaranteed, right? We got Fisher, Johnson, and Cheatham for sure. I think Tracy Carter.
Oh, well, Tracy.
I think Tracy Carter
Is Tracy Carter guaranteed to start at the 1?
I think he's the favorite.
I don't think it's a guarantee.
I would say of those three you listed, I don't know if Juwan's guaranteed.
Absolutely not.
I think Fisher.
Fisher is number 1, obviously, 100%.
Fisher's number 1. I agree with Cheatham.
I would say Tracy number 2 is most likely to be the starter.
Yeah, I think he's a lock.
I mean, he's not going to get pushed by Howard for a starting spot in game 1, I think, throughout the season.
I agree with you, probably not, but I wouldn't. His assist-to-turnover rate was not at a level last season where you wouldn't look at somebody else, and if they played well enough in training camp and up to the start of the season that you wouldn't consider it. Now, granted, if you do that, you open a can of worms of people transferring, if all of a sudden you just starting your, freshman that came in. But I don't think it's an absolute mortal lock. Probably, yes. I'd say 85% Tracy's probably your starting point guard come day 1.
So you guys really don't think Juwan Johnson's a lock to start?
Absolutely not.
Okay, and so what is your percentage thoughts on him? Because I think with the way he played down the stretch last year, that there's a very small chance that he'd play himself out of a starting role.
What have we constantly alluded to that this team needs to insert into the lineup? We just talked about it from the conversation in Madness. They need someone that can shoot the ball that's going to have to be on the floor to play 23 to 28 minutes a game. We need someone that's a threat that can stretch the court. He's not that.
We need somebody to play defense too, and he's clearly
no argument there.
Our best defender, our perimeter defender. That's all I'm saying.
That's a good point. It's a good point. So I think we're agreed that Luke Fisher's a lock at the 5. I'd like to throw Caton Reinhardt's name out there at the 3 or 4. I think he's we've seen him play, but we haven't seen him play in a Marquette uniform, so that needs to be worked out. But he's a shooter and he's got size, and those are two things we definitely need. So I could see him
hustle and muscle, baby, hustle and muscle.
Point guard's unsettled. I think I would be very surprised if either Dwayne Wilson or Juwan Johnson. I think one of those guys gets to start in the first game. I don't know. I don't think both of them do. I think one of them definitely gets to start. But I don't know who it's going to be.
I think obviously the biggest question is the power forward spot.
Yeah, who's starting at the 4 in this group that you feel comfortable with? And that's who?
It's got to be Reinhardt.
Yeah, I think it's Reinhardt.
I think it's Reinhardt too.
Yeah, it has to be Reinhardt.
That doesn't mean I'm comfortable with it, but maybe by game 2 I will be. We'll see.
Yeah, I mean we haven't really seen the guy play, so it's hard to say right now. But on paper, he looks to fit the mold of what we need in that position.
And on paper, we're basically going 6'10", 6'6", 6'5", 6'5", and then Tracy's 6 feet even. Like,
it's not the shortest roster.
Yeah. Now that you read that, that's the first time I've kind of my mind these last month or 2 months that we've been talking, the 5 of us. I've been just focusing on our lack of size, but just hearing those sizes listed off, it gives me a little better feeling that some of our guards.
We're going to need the guards to contribute on the boards. That's
you're right. Yeah,
it's been worse in the past.
Absolutely.
All right, so let's transition here a little bit to talking a little bit more about the schedule. We wanted to do a little bit of a deeper dive into some of the key non-conference games, and then also take a quick look at the Big East teams that we're going to be facing up with. Just last week was Big East Media Day. The Big East coaches voted Marquette 7th in the Big East. Me personally, that wasn't a surprise to me. I think this team, this coaching staff, these players have a lot to prove. So that's, in my opinion, where that comes from. We were listed ahead of St. John's, Providence, and DePaul. But let's go ahead and dive quickly into the non-conference schedule. So we open up right away with Vanderbilt in Annapolis, Maryland on November 11th. Brian Henry, I know you looked into this game a little bit. You have some familiarity, at least in the past, with the Vanderbilt program. What are you thinking this matchup will look like?
I think it'll be a good test right off the top. I think we're all in agreement that the non-conference schedule as a whole is something that's much improved this season. Vandy's an NCAA tournament team from a year ago. They did lose 2 first-round draft picks off that team. So the biggest opportunity for Marquette is they're going to be very weak in the backcourt. They're sliding over basically what has been a shooting guard for the last couple seasons to the point guard position. And I think that's going to create, in our very first game with a new coach in Bryce Drew, who came over from Valparaiso. For those who remember Bryce Drew, he hit the winning shot against Mississippi in the tournament in 96 or 97. And then has been coaching, replaced his father as the head coach at Valpo, and has been there for the last 6-7 years. It'll be a first game, brand new coach, new team, lots of transfers. If there is ever an opportunity to jump on somebody as they're figuring out the process of a new coach, this is it. Biggest trouble that's going to come from that is their 7'1" center, Luke Cornett. He's mobile. He's a stretch 5 type guy, plays on the perimeter, plays inside. He'll pull Luke Fisher away from the basket a little bit. It'll be interesting to see how Luke guards him. I think that'll be the most fun matchup to watch in that game, or the two centers going back and forth. But team that was in the NCAA tournament last year lost their 2 best players. They're young and new coach, so we'll see.
So this will be a neutral site game, so one team won't necessarily have the upper hand with familiarity with the arena or with the settings or surroundings. And you have some familiarity with Bryce Drew. What makes him so good? Is it the in-game adjustments? Is it motivation of players?
It's a style thing. Bryce Drew, I had the opportunity to cover him while he was at Valparaiso. He's remember, a lot of people remember he did make the NBA and played a couple seasons with the Rockets. Got into coaching soon thereafter. He is a guy. He's very much thinks the game on a professional level. They play a very pace and space oriented system. That's how they did at Valparaiso. There was 5 shooters on the court at all times. Now again, I can't necessarily speak to how he's going to incorporate that plan based on the roster he inherited there from Kevin Stallings, who's now at Pittsburgh. So I think that's what he would like to do. It's a lot of shooters, but if they have the bodies to do that, he obviously may amend that plan. So it's kind of a wild card. Again, new coach. We'll have to see.
All right, so moving right along, after the Vanderbilt game, Marquette jumps right into the 2K Classic. One of the games that we know is a lock is playing against the University of Michigan. Michigan was a team that finished 8th in the Big Ten last year, 22-12 overall record. They made the tournament. They're losing some of their top production. They had 4 transfers in the spring from this past year. Spike Albrecht left. Aubrey Dawkins went to Central Florida. Karis LeVert was their senior high production guy. He went to the NBA and is now with the Brooklyn Nets. They also had a transfer, Cameron Chatham, who transferred to University of Detroit Mercy. So Michigan is in a position where they have an incredibly solid and well-known coaching staff. John Beilein does a great job from year in, year out. But what they need to determine is they've had production from some of their freshmen and sophomores in the past couple of years, and juniors as well. Those guys are now going to be a year older, and they're going to be need to fill a bigger role and step into the void left, particularly by Karis LeVert, who's now in the NBA. So I think this is a game, given that it's early in the year, given that it's a neutral court location, I think this is a game that Marquette could steal. I think we need to have our coaching on point and in-game adjustments on point. But when you look over the Michigan roster, so Marquette only has 2 players. It's 6'10" or above. For Michigan, they have at least 4 players that size or above. So one of the things, and this is going to be a common theme as we go on throughout the season, how can we stay out of foul trouble? How can Luke Fisher stay out of foul trouble? How can Kate and Reinhardt fill in? These are all going to be questions that are critical to beating Michigan early in the season here.
An important thing to note, though, Mike, which is why I think this matchup will be tough. I know they lost a couple of those big production guys, but they were hurt for the majority of last season. LeVert made a very small impact, same with Albrecht. Duncan Robinson is going to be a matchup nightmare for Marquette. He is a wing that can shoot it, puts the ball on the floor, sees it real well, sees the court real well, and distributes from that kind of point forward position. I think that's going to be fascinating to see who guards him and how they defend the offense originating from a guy that big and that athletic. I think that's going to be a very tough matchup because they shoot it, and they have a player that's going to be a matchup nightmare for how our roster is currently constructed.
And Robinson was in the top 35 in the nation in true shooting percentage, according to Ken Pomeroy. So someone who, and also in terms of effective field goal percentage, so someone who is incredibly efficient when they shoot the ball.
I mean, big guards are going to be a problem for this team this year. A 6'8" guard is going to cause some trouble. So that'll be a fun game to watch because they're going to hopefully learn how to deal with it because we'll have plenty of those in the Big East we'll have to guard.
So if Marquette beats Michigan in the 2K Classic and if Pittsburgh wins their game in the 2K Classic, Marquette and Pittsburgh will meet in the championship round of the 2K Classic. And just in case that happens, we wanted to give you a look at Pittsburgh. Pete Worth, I know you did a little digging on Pittsburgh. What's their program like post-Dixon? How are they looking this year?
Well, let's hope it's interesting because the last 17 years, I think we could classify it as Pitt as the most boring college basketball program out there. I don't know if you guys agree. But known for their slow it down, defensive grinding style of play. They lose their overall best player, guy that we remember, I think, from the Big East days in James Robinson, their point guard. Basically, they're going to have to rely on their front court. Michael Young's up for ACC first team. He's going to be the leader of this team. They have a lot of other guys that fit his kind of mold, that 6'9" bruiser kind of guy. Really going to struggle in the backcourt and really going to struggle to score points. So if they can do what they've done under Jamie Dixon for forever, I think they'll be close to big or for NCAA tournament contention. But they're going to struggle to score like they usually do. We'll see if Kevin Stallings, who Brian mentioned earlier in talking about Vanderbilt, moved over, is now the coach of Pitt after Dixon left for TCU. If he can kind of rev up their offense a little bit, and I think we're going to really see a change overall in the next couple of years in Pitt basketball. And go more of that kind of offensive team as opposed to Dixon's defensive scheme. But I think that's going to be not till Stallings gets a couple of more talented offensive players in. And so, first of all, Pitt's got to beat SMU for us to even play them, a talented SMU squad. But, it's good to know a little bit about them before we get to play them. So,
at the conclusion of the 2K Classic, Marquette has a number of games. The first true road game against a legitimate opponent that we're going to have is at Georgia on December 4th.
Georgia?
Love it.
The house that Dominique Wilkins built.
Nah, Contavious Caldwell Pope. I'd take him.
The house that KCP built.
KCP?
So when the Marquette basketball program heads down to Athens, Georgia, that's going to be a true road test. Pete Mohan, what can you tell us about the Georgia team headed into this year, and what do you think Marquette's going to need to do to pull off a big win on the road early in the season?
Well, you don't really think of Georgia as a basketball powerhouse, but they have, in fact, won 20-plus games each of their last 3 years. It's the 8th year under Coach Mark Fox, so it's a pretty established regime there in Georgia. Hey, they can say something that we can't from last year, and they made the NIT.
Ooh, no. Burn.
Got them. So they have a couple guys that return next year that are pretty formidable scorers, actually. Both a front court and a back court punch. They actually return the first and third leading scorers in the SEC last year in guard J.J. Frazier and forward Yante Maten, who's actually from Pontiac, Michigan.
Maten, Phil.
Maten. Oh, that's him. So, anyways, those guys will really carry the load. They both averaged around 15, 16 points a game last year. It'll pose a challenge to Marquette's big men, as we saw Ben Bentel kind of tear us up last year for Providence a couple times. That sort of 6'9", 225-pound guy who can hit inside and outside shots. We've struggled defending that type of player.
Despite the fact that we beat Providence both times last year.
Exactly. Isn't that funny? So maybe we let him score 30 points and we just win. That's the strategy.
Just like we used to do with Heron Goaty. Right, Brian?
Oh, God, did he light us up like a Christmas tree.
Goaty!
As far as other key players, I just wanted to mention, as far as Georgia's concerned, they got a transfer coming in out of the JUCO ranks named Pape Diatta from the College of Southern Idaho, and he's actually he put up some decent numbers, about 14 and 8 rebounds. So he's kind of almost like that Caden Reinhardt type. Maybe we'll look for a little transfer battle in this game and see who comes out on top.
Upon returning from Athens, Georgia, is the game that Marquette fans have circled on their calendar every year is against the University of Wisconsin Badgers. So this year we have Wisconsin in Milwaukee at the BMO Harris Bradley Center. Wisconsin is 2 years out from playing for the national championship. What does their team look like this year, Eric Pond?
Last year, Wisconsin started slow. They started 9-9. We caught them right in the middle of that. After Bo Ryan's midseason departure, I think we all remember Greg Gard took over, guided them to a 13-4 record. From there, they finished the season strong. They had a buzzer beater from Bronson Koenig to defeat Xavier in the round of 32, and a loss in the Sweet 16 to Notre Dame. I think most notably, you're talking about their being 2 years removed from the national championship. That was their fifth Sweet 16 appearance in 6 years. Unfortunately for Marquette fans, Wisconsin is returning the entirety of their roster. Forward Nigel Hayes is a unanimous 2016-17 preseason All-Big Ten selection, along with center Ethan Happ. So looking at last year's matchup against Wisconsin, since they're returning basically the same squad, we really controlled that game, ended up winning it 57-55 in Madison. We were 8-2 at that point in the season, really had control of the paint, played impressive defense, and we hung on during a late Badgers charge and left with a victory. So this year, I think we're obviously looking at a much different game plan. We're going to have to really retool it. Fisher will have to play well if we have a shot at winning this one. He'll need to showcase rim protection, obviously, and create second chances on misses. It also goes without saying that he and our few other guys with any size at all are going to have to stay out of foul trouble. And I think, to win this one, we're going to need to have just damn good shooting.
Okay, so after the showdown with Wisconsin at the Bradley Center on December 10th, which we will no doubt walk away with a W from, we head pretty quickly into the Big East schedule. But before we get there, any big picture thoughts from any of you on the non-conference schedule? Obviously, it's vastly improved from last year's. I like it. I like this. I like the non-con schedule. It's tougher. It's not too tough. I think it's a good building block for years to come.
There's lots of teams in transition in this kind of group of teams that we're going to play in the non-con. No one game really stands out or jumps off the page, I should say, like when you're looking through the schedule. Obviously the Wisconsin game, but there's a lot of winnable games against quality high conference, high major opponents that gives us great opportunities to, build a pretty good resume.
I think beating Georgia will probably have one of the largest impacts on our RPI, because it's a true road game, as well as their pedigree for winning 20 games in the last 3 seasons, as well as having a couple of really high level scores. So I think that I guess I'm not sure of the entire landscape of the SEC and how Georgia might end up falling in that conference, but certainly if we can get a win on the road there, that should add some points to our RPI for sure.
I know these games are booked years in advance, and there's no way you can guarantee how good someone's going to be, but it is just refreshing to look at the schedule and see Vanderbilt, NCAA tournament team from a year ago, Michigan, NCAA team from a year ago, Fresno State, NCAA team from a year ago, Wisconsin. That just on its surface. It doesn't guarantee they're going to be good. People lose people and they could be awful, but at least there's some pedigree of success entering the season where you hopefully will get challenged by that roster. I think it's great to see going into conference play.
I think just to segue, before you go ahead, Mike, obviously we've said that this season we think that the non-conference is somewhat improved from what it was last year, if not majorly improved. But
drastically.
But when you look at the second half of the roster, what we're about to talk about in the Big East, just before we get into the individual teams, do you guys see the Big East overall as being a strong conference again, or as a whole, where do you guys see the conference landing this year?
Well, you say again, did you think it was a strong conference a year ago?
Well, I think anytime you have the national champion, you have to say that.
Absolutely. Do they get the entire conference?
I think the top is still just as strong, but I think where there could be some marginal improvement, and we'll probably have a better idea by the end of this conversation, is those middle 3 to 4 teams, which I think Marquette should where Marquette should fall in from time to time. Those are the teams that need to make the jump, but I don't think they're going to this year. I don't think those are the teams to have a strong conference. You need those teams, and we don't have them this year.
We are a top-heavy league. I don't think it's even necessarily a terrible thing to say. It means you have some really quality teams. I think the three at the top are leaps and bounds ahead of everybody else, and everybody's playing for fourth. And that's now again, crazy things can happen, injuries happen, but that's where the league is right now, and that's pretty much what it's been since it reformed into this 10-team format.
You really think Creighton is the clear-cut number 3?
Yeah, leaps and bounds ahead of Marquette, Brian. I'd take that.
Them are St. John's. That's a joke.
Yeah. Well,
Villanova and Xavier for sure. I'll give you the top 2. After that, I think it's really going to be similar to last year. I think we might be slightly better. I think Butler's going to be slightly worse. I think Seton Hall is going to be slightly worse. Creighton's going to be slightly better. So I think at the end of the regular season, I think it's all going to kind of come out even, just like very similar to last year. Can Marquette beat those middle-of-the-road teams that we struggled with so much last year? The Seton Halls, with dropping that game to DePaul, and obviously the games against Xavier and Villanova that we got blown out. But those games against the Creightons, Seton Hall, Georgetown, and there's another one, and Providence, Butler. Those are going to be where we build our resume and try to make the tournament. Those games are going to be huge for us.
Well, you're not building your resume against Providence and Butler and DePaul. You're hurting your resume if you lose to one of them, like it did last year. We were a 20-win team a year ago that didn't even get a sniff at the NCAA tournament because we lost at home to DePaul. Now, granted, you throw Belmont in there, that was that too. That DePaul loss was deplorable.
Mm-hmm.
Can't have it.
I would argue that a win is building a resume.
Yes.
Yeah. That's how I would argue. But in order to get that resume that wants the committee to select you for the tournament, those are necessary wins.
We need some of these lower-end teams to win some of their games in the non-conference. We need DePaul to knock off a team for once.
We don't even know if St. John's players can understand anything Chris Mullen says. So to imply that there's a chance that they could beat anyone of moderate talent right now is, I think, a bit of a stretch.
On December 28th, Marquette will open the Big East season against the Georgetown University Hoyas in Milwaukee. Living and working in Washington, D.C., the first thing that comes out of any Hoya fan's mouth when you talk to them about their basketball program is, what do you think about John Thompson III? How much longer is he going to be there? Do you support his continued position at the university? And there's a pretty big mix amongst fans. There is a perceived downward trajectory in the Georgetown program over the past handful of years. And there is a sense amongst Georgetown fans that if that isn't at least pointed in the right direction this year, then it may be time for a move, which I think is a pretty big statement from the folks that I've talked to. Looking at kind of how Georgetown finished out last season, this shocked me when I looked at this. So Georgetown finished the season, the Big East season, at 7-11 overall. At one point, they went on the road and beat number 5 Xavier to go to 12-7 overall and 5-2 in the conference. From that point forward, they went 2-10. So they tanked in one of the most spectacular ways possible. And those 2 wins that came towards the end of their season were only against St. John's and Creighton. So
I think everybody knew that's who they beat. You don't even think you had to say it.
I didn't. Thank you for the refresher, Mike.
So needless to say, they didn't make the tournament. Finished 8th in the Big East, only in front of DePaul and St. John's. Just looking at their roster, I think the name that most Marquette fans are familiar with, they've lost Devontae Smith-Rivera, who was someone who was fairly efficient, had a high assist rate, but he was on the court for an inordinate amount of the minutes available to him. He was really someone, I think it's going to be a case for them of, when you lose someone, even if they weren't the most efficient and most effective player, when you lose someone with senior experience and they're gone, you immediately realize when you plug a freshman in there, everything that you gave up, even if it was for the long-term benefit. Georgetown has...
I just have to say, I've never heard someone refer to Devontae Smith-Rivera as efficient. The dude is a chucker. Let's be real here. He's the Deion Waiters of Big East basketball.
I still thought last year when we played him that every three-pointer he took was going to go in. I just had that feeling. He scared me.
Just to close it up here, Georgetown does have a transfer coming in from Robert Morris. His name is Rodney Pryor. He's a fifth-year guy. Georgetown fans are really looking at him as is someone to fill a key role in that, in being a two-way player. So this is going to be a transition year for Georgetown. They don't have a lot of proven quality returning. They have some transfers coming in that are going to need to step up in a big way, and their core pieces haven't played together a lot. So it's going to be a bumpy early season likely for Georgetown, and they're going to need to, through coaching and through team building, et cetera, are going to need to sort out some things pretty quickly if they want to right the ship and keep JT3 around for a while.
So the coaches or whoever votes in the Big East preseason poll picked Georgetown and Seton Hall tied for fourth. From what you just said, that doesn't sound like a fourth-place Big East team to me. I suspect they come in lower than that.
Like we mentioned earlier, I mean, 3 through 9, I think, is 3 through 8, I would say, with DePaul and St. John's maybe near the bottom, is a crapshoot. Maybe you want to throw St. John's in there into 9. But I think all of those teams are very evenly matched. For example, Butler, they lose 2 of their top scorers, 2 of their main contributors in their last 10 seasons, 2 of their most memorable players in Roosevelt Jones and Kellen Dunham. And those 2 guys were the huge majority of their scoring last year. Where are they going to make up for that? I don't know. They got a couple of good, 3-star recruits coming in. But
hey, Keelan Martin was voted first team All Big East.
Keelan Martin, sorry, yeah, I forgot about Keelan Martin. I apologize to the Butler fans that turn in. But he will probably be first team All Big East. Keelan Martin, very good athlete, rebounder. But Butler's going to struggle to score. I think they're going to take a dip a little bit. They're going to be winnable just like they were last year. Another team I focused on, DePaul, which was very hard to do, to look into them. Brian's covering his face. VS, I spent about 10 to 15 minutes looking through DePaul basketball, and yes, it was as depressing as you can imagine. Although they do have Billy Garrett, who will be a senior this year, who had the game-winning and won against us last year, as I'm sure we all remember. And he'll average about 20 points a game, but the rest of their lineup is pretty mediocre. Although I did see a video of them taking a team bonding trip to the Men's Warehouse, learning how to buy some nice suits, and I think they're going to really look good off the court and look miserable on it, as they typically do.
Can I make a suggestion here?
Yeah.
All right, let's all go on the record here. Let's set the DePaul Big East Conference wins at 3.5. Are you going over or under 3.5?
Over. They got 4 in them this year.
Wow, bold.
That's very bold. I'm taking the under.
Yeah, I'm taking the under as well.
Yeah, give me the under on that one.
What about you?
Under. I'm going to say under as well.
You do realize they play Marquette, St. John's, and Providence 6 times. I'm just saying, until they
is this their last year in the All-State?
It is, yeah. Yeah, so they'll be moving from the All-State in Rosemont down to downtown Chicago near McCormick Place. Whether or not that's a good move, we'll see if it actually generates...
That I'm sure that'll fix things.
Yeah, probably even a worse commute down to the stadium for the students. So, I don't know. It's a very curious decision by the faculty there.
I don't know who the athletic director was in 2005 when they moved into the Big East, but that guy should have his own yacht. He should have his own plane. Like, the amount of money DePaul has made being in this conference and just providing absolutely nothing in 10-plus years is shameful. But props to that guy for getting him in the league.
And just to go back to the over-under debate, you mentioned that they do have to play a handful of teams, including Marquette and St. John's 6 times, but DePaul's DePaul every night they take the court. So I think the under's a pretty safe bet.
I think this is the year Marquette does it and doesn't lose to DePaul this year.
By 1.
And I think we have spent enough time talking about DePaul basketball. We should move on.
Great point, Brian.
All right, so moving on to another team that was at the bottom of the Big East last year and has been for a number of years, but is at least thinking about a turnaround, and they've got the recruiting class to back it up, is St. John's. Eric, what are all these high recruiting classes going to pay off for Chris Mullins?
Yeah, it seems like they're really turning a corner here a little bit in Chris Mullins' second year as head coach of his alma mater. They're picked, I think, 8 in the Big East coaches poll that we've been discussing. Last year they finished 8-24, which was dead last in the Big East. I think most notably for us Marquette fans, St. John's had its season come to a close with a 101-93 loss to Marquette at the Big East tournament. They returned 4 rotation pieces in Federico Mussini, Malik Ellison, Kasum Yakwe and Yakuba Sima, as well as getting some quality transfer talent. They have Tennessee transfer Tariq Owens. The coup de grace here for Chris Mullen and St. John's is Shamori Pons. He's a 6'1" point guard from Brooklyn. He's the top recruit out of New York City, and he's a consensus top 40 recruit nationally. They also have redshirt point guard Marcus Lovett. Like Shamori Pons, he's a lefty. Sophomore forward Kasum Yakwe, I think he's going to be a big key to this. He's going to be a more versatile offensive threat. He can drive the ball, but he, I think, is looking for a consistent ability to actually shoot the ball. Federica Musini is that Italian guard. He's also returning. He played in all 32 games last year, started 24 of them. You know, this team has size and length. They have some raw offensive talent, but they have really the shot blocking ability in Sima and Yakwe to give us some trouble. They can protect the rim. I think there are question marks certainly in having a backcourt with a redshirt freshman and a true freshman coming in. They're turning the corner. They're still St. John's until we see otherwise, but there is the possibility that we have issues there with their size and length.
One team last year that had plenty of NBA talent on it and some talent returning, but that somehow Marquette was able to handle both times we played was Providence. I still, for the life of me, I have no idea how we did that. We know they lost Chris Dunn, but they got some other pieces coming back. Pete Mohan, what do you think Providence looks like when they hit the court this year?
Providence, after being a very solid tournament team last year, has lost their primary two players in Chris Dunn and Ben Bentel. Dunn was drafted 5th overall, and this team's really short on experience at this point. They were picked overall to finish 9th, which it's saying something when you're only beating out DePaul here, and they got St. John's and Marquette picked ahead of you. They returned 4 guys who primarily had a role last year, and only one double-figure scorer, and that's junior forward Rodney Bullock. The other juniors on the team, upperclassmen, are Jalen Lindsey and Kyron Cartwright. And they also have sophomore shooter Ryan Fazekas, who I don't know if he's any relation to the other Fazekas, Nick Fazekas.
From
right?
Nevada, if I do recall.
Nevada, right? Yeah. He was the man. I don't know if they're related.
Legendary Fazekas shooters.
Of course. Anyways, so they do have a Fazekas, which is tough to tend with. But certainly this is not the Providence team we saw last year at all. And even Coach Ed Cooley has acknowledged himself that it's going to be kind of a season with some growing pains, and where they really look to see what their new guys have to offer.
Does Ed Cooley, has he patched up those bald spots to your knowledge?
A relevant question. So all in all, Providence, a good team, but some growing pains that are going to happen this year, and they're going to look a lot different from some of the high-end talent that we saw last year.
I don't know if good team. Sorry, Mike.
Good team's too far.
I don't know about good team. We should be able to beat them twice again if we really, put our minds to it.
Well, I hope
think about it real hard and wish it.
So Seton Hall had a pretty good year last year, certainly by Seton Hall standards. Eric, can they replicate some of that success or build on it this year?
Yeah, absolutely. I think Seton Hall is actually set up pretty well to match some of their success that they saw, some of that surprising success they saw in the 2015-16 campaign. They are losing Isaiah Whitehead, picked in the second round, 42 overall, by the Utah Jazz, and fellow guard Derek Gordon. But aside from that, they've really got most everybody coming back. They've got Kadeen Carrington coming back, Desi Rodriguez, walking double-double, Angel Delgado, Ismail Sanago. I mean, they really do have almost everyone from that team returning. I think they can, be in the thick of things again and really contend in the Big East and probably go for a second straight NCAA tournament bid with all the experience they're bringing back. I think Carrington and Rodriguez are going to lead the way. They can score. They can carry the team and carry the load. Whitehead leaving opens up shots for him. Delgado is going to be a threat to go for a double-double every time he's on the floor. I think Seton Hall has questions at point guard with Isaiah Whitehead and Derek Gordon leaving. They also lack forward depth, but I think someone's going to step up as the scorer in Whitehead's place. They play tough defense. They have a more potent offense probably than Marquette. And Kadeem Carrington and Desi Rodriguez are going to be their biggest threats.
Just to touch on that, I think there is a chance that Seton Hall improves this year with the subtraction of Isaiah Whitehead, just because he did dominate the ball so much. And I think if they're able to spread the ball around more, I think they'll be able to match some of their success that they had last year, despite the loss.
I think that's exactly on point. What's that Bill Simmons rule? The
Ewing theory.
Subtraction of the star. Yeah, the Ewing theory. I think there is some of that. I think there's no star power on the team right now, but Willard has the players with the talent and also experience where he can make the tournament again. I think they're going to finish a top 4 to 5 team. I think that coach's poll is right on.
Seton Hall finished last year in the Big East at third, just behind Villanova and Xavier. So from all signs, it sounds like they'll be able to build on the success that they had last year. Moving to a team that had by far the most success last year from the Big East, Villanova. Pete Mohan, we know that Villanova loses a couple of pieces. I think most notably Ryan Arcidiacono, but Chris Jenkins is back, Jalen Brunson is back. They have some other pieces back. Ochefu's gone. Can Villanova repeat this year? And if not, where do you think the ceiling for them is?
As some people around here might know, I'm not a big Ryan Arcidiacono fan.
It's very well known in Marquette circles, I would say.
You know, of course, they did lose some pieces. You mentioned them losing Ochefu, but, you know, right on cue, Villanova happens to get a guy named Omari Spellman, a 5-star center, 6'9" guy, number 21 ranked overall. So, you know, it's kind of frustrating as a Marquette fan when we're struggling to have size, and then you have Villanova who graduates a national champion center and can just bring in a 5-star to replace him right off the bat. They also had another top 100 recruit in Dylan Painter, so, I mean, they're just refilling the cupboard. I think one thing about Villanova, though, I wanted to mention is the schedule. You talked about the ceiling. They have a real easy non-conference schedule, and they play in the weak Gildan-Charleston Classic, where they face basically no one. Western Michigan, you know, row the boat in the first game. All right, that's. They play the winner of Wake Forest UTEP, which and then on the other side of the bracket, it's Mississippi State, UCF, Boise State, and Charleston. So I mean, they don't play anyone big in their preseason tournament, and then outside of their Philly obligations, there's really no one else on their schedule. Purdue, Notre Dame, okay, whatever. And then they're in the Big East. So they kind of have a cupcake schedule, but when you look at it, by the end of the year, they're going to be a team that only has like 5 losses. So they'll be right there in one of the top 1, 2, or 3 seeds in the nation, I think.
Moving to a team that finished right behind Villanova, Xavier. They had an incredible year they had a great year last year. A strong team. Brian Henry.
I believe it's pronounced Xavier.
And increíble.
Session.
What kind of incredible year do you think Xavier will have this year?
Xavier will be, I think, the second best team in the conference. I don't think that shocks anybody. Mike kind of alluded to it. They were 28-6 a year ago. I think since this current iteration of the Big East was created, Xavier has filled what we all hoped would be Marquette's role. I think they've been wildly consistent. I shouldn't say not think. They have been wildly consistent. They've made the second weekend of the tournament 5 times in the last 9 years. They've had quality high-level players. They've had good post play, good guard play. That'll continue again this year. Trayvon Blewett is going to be a monster, potential Big East Player of the Year. He's a 6'6" wing. I think he's still standing on the left wing at the Bradley Center, just making it rain from the way he lit us up in that game last year. Just came out as a preseason third-team All-American. He is going to cause us trouble again.
But can I just say, Brian, if he's shooting free throws at the end of the game and it's a tight game against us, would you want anyone else at the line other than someone whose last name is Blewett?
That, without a question, that is exactly who I want on the line. But nevertheless, the numbers do point. He can bomb and he can get to the rim. He's not a bad rebounder, too. The one guy I think that'll be their biggest, that'll drive the engine, their point guard, Edmund Sumner, for those who remember last year. He was a redshirt freshman. Big guy at 6'6". He's back. He's projected to be a first-round draft pick. I didn't see that last year, but Draft Express already has him up in the first round, which, again, preseason college basketball season, take that with a grain of salt. But people at least are talking about them that way. They are what they are. They lost, for everyone remembers, they lost in the tournament a year ago on that Bronson Koenig shot for Wisconsin. Rock solid. They're going to be young in the front court. I think that was obviously Blewett was their best player. But the fact that they lost Jalen Reynolds and James Farr, both 6'10", 240, 250 pounds, they pounded people on the glass when they had to. They're gonna be putting new people into that role. Hopefully, not as dominant, but I think they're far and away clearly the second best team in the conference.
I think Sumner's going to have a huge season for them. The small amount that I did see of him, I was very impressed with him. The ability to get to the rack, and he's got a great shot as well, and played really big in big games for them. In the first round of the NCAA tournament, he played really well, and games against Villanova, he had 20 points, and games against Seton Hall in March in the Big East tournament, he came up big. He showed me a lot for a freshman. I think he's going to have a huge year.
Fort Sumner is formidable, is what you're saying.
Exactly. As it always has been.
Moving on to the final team in the Big East that we have yet to touch upon, and that's Creighton. Brian Henry, what do you moving right along? What do you see from Creighton?
Don't all of you get so excited at once talking about Creighton. I mean, try to contain it. 9-9 in the conference a year ago, 20-15. They finished sixth. I think there's only one guy that's worth really. They're going to get a couple. Their backcourt will be formidable. Everybody remembers Mo Watson Jr., who transferred in there last year. Far and away their best player. He entered the draft, didn't hire an agent, came back. So he will be priorities 1, 2, and 3 when playing Creighton. Now, the preseason number 3 team in the conference, I agree with you guys, where I think we're all on occurrence. 3 and hopefully through 7 could replace each other depending on how the chips fall. They do have an elite level player, and he'll be the guy you'll have to stop because the ball's in his hands a lot. They run a lot of pick and roll for him, and he can shoot it.
Creighton's just one of those teams where if you go play there at their building, you don't expect to win.
Yes.
You don't expect to win.
Tough place to play.
And their ability to shoot the ball, if I recall in last year's game, they made maybe like 1 or 2 threes against us, which was basically the reason why we won. I think we escaped that game with only a few point margin. But they will always have good shooters on that team, it seems like, and I don't expect anything different on this year's squad.
All right, fellas. So let's put a bow on it. And as we mentioned previously, Big East coaches predicted Marquette would finish 7th in the Big East this year. I've offered some of my thoughts on that. Realistically, what do you guys think are our we only deal in realistic terms around here at the Real Chili Podcast. What do you guys think are expectations for the Marquette basketball team this season, both in terms of success in the non-conference schedule and overall in the Big East? You don't need to get into the nitty-gritty, but big picture, what do you think this looks like now that we've had the chance to digest what these teams look like that we'll be facing off against?
We are what the preseason rankings say we are in this situation. I think we are a 6th or 7th best team in the Big East Conference. I surely hope to be wrong, but I think the way the roster is presently constructed, that's what we're staring at with what we're going to be going up against.
I agree with that, Brian. At the moment.
Thanks, Peter.
You're welcome. But I also think that we have a chance to climb those rankings a little bit as the season progresses. Like I said, Villanova, Xavier, boom, 1-2. If those two aren't 1-2, I will be, frankly, very shocked. But
Can I pose a question to you and everybody in this group? All right, so we know those, again, barring catastrophic injury, we know those two are at the top. This league typically has gotten 5 teams in. Worst case scenario, 4. Can you see Marquette finishing in the top 4 or 5 of this conference?
Well, if you had let me talk earlier, finish my thought, I was going to touch on that. And the answer is yes, because I think 3 through 8, 3 through 9 are on a very even plane. And I think if we beat those teams like Creighton, Providence, Butler, then we'll have a chance. I think not one of those teams has the roster and has the talent to really set themselves apart. It's going to be who can play the best consistently throughout the Big East season, who can go through that grind. And I think Marquette's roster has the talent to be able to compete with those teams and to win enough games to be in the top 4. Whether they do that or not, I also see them, it not working out and them falling down to 8 or 7 or 8 like the predictions say. But I think that middle of the conference is such a crapshoot.
You basically just took 45 seconds to say anything can happen.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Enjoy the Real Chili podcast, everyone. That's what this is all about.
So here's I'm going to take issue with the 7th seed prediction. First off, I think there's a lot this coaching staff needs to prove. So that's my big qualifier. Marquette finished 7th in the Big East last year. We had an 8-10 record. And the overall talent on this roster, particularly shooting, is a hell of a lot better this year. In addition to that, I think as we've just discussed, I think there are a number of teams that have lost talent and that are in a little bit more of aside from the top 2, that are in a little bit more of a rebuilding mode than they were last year. So I think it is, barring a catastrophic collapse, I think it is reasonable to expect a 5th or 6th place finish in the Big East. I really do think that middle is very fluid, and I think we can capitalize it with the additions that Wojo has made.
This is Pete Mohan. I just want to say that I think that you guys have kind of hit on the potential variance of this league. One thing that Mike said is that we've probably gained more talent compared to the other teams in the league. We've gained quite a bit, and we haven't really lost anyone. So there's that net positive there. But
except for the first-round draft pick.
Never heard of him.
That was our best player.
We're moving on from Henry. All right. This is a new team. This is a new team with a new identity, Brian. And that identity is not playing defense and shooting a lot of threes. So I think that at least our shooting might be something that puts fans in the seats, and something that we've struggled to do the last few years is win home games that we should have won. And I think maybe at least if we hit some threes and play an exciting brand of basketball, whether or not we'll have defense, that's to be seen. But if we do some exciting things on offense, maybe fans will show up. Maybe it'll be loud in the BC. Maybe we can win some home games, and who knows, go 10-8 in the conference. That would be great.
I think all these new additions, you really want to see the team come together and gel. It takes time when you're sort of cobbling together transfer pieces and freshmen and really having them hopefully take on significant minutes for this team. I think that said, one thing that really transcends that is shooting ability, and I guess you could potentially say size, but we're bringing in a lot of shooting ability. I think the league in general, as has been discussed over and over here, has a lot of teams with in the middle of the pack with high ceilings, but with pretty low floors. I'm just hoping we're one of those high ceiling teams and fulfill sort of a run here, a promised NCAA tournament run.
I think that so many teams lost key pieces, that including us, but I think we brought, like Pete Mohan said, we brought in more talent than those other middling teams did. And I think that's what gives us the better chance to get in the top 5.
Let me throw a quick rapid-fire thing, Mike. I know you're looking to wrap it up, but let me throw this at everybody. Best case scenario for this season, and what is the defining aspect of it? And make it fairly quick. To me, I think it's an NCAA tournament berth, and Hanif Cheatham turns into a first-team All-Big East caliber guard. I don't think it's probable, but I think it's a possibility that's out there, and I think that's something that propels us into a top 4 if that were to happen. I'm just curious, everybody, what's a best case scenario?
I'm just going to say the best case for this team is probably about 12-6 in conference, making the tournament, by the skin of their teeth, and that happens when Tracy Carter takes the next step. If he can really control this team, we have the shooters, we haven't had a real dominant point guard in a while, and I think that's been one of the things that's held us back from making that run at the postseason. So if we do have that best case scenario, it's because everyone's staying healthy, especially the big men, and Tracy Carter's taking the next step.
It's Luke Fisher staying out of foul trouble, which is a big if, and Juwan Johnson making the Big East tournament or Big East all second team. Or all Big East second team. I think he's got the talent to do that, and I see him scoring 25 points in Dayton in the play-in game against UAB or some other crappy school, and then maybe it's losing in the first round, but that's kind of where I see it this season going.
Couldn't agree more. I think best case scenario is Juwan Johnson making a jump or continuing some of the trajectory we saw at the end of last season. I think that's a deep run in the Big East tournament, and I think that's an NCAA tournament berth. I think best case scenario for the season might also be a game-winning shot or two from some of these new guys.
All right, folks, that's going to do it for us here at the Real Chili Podcast. We hope you enjoyed the second episode. You can find us on 3 different platforms, one of which you're listening to right now. We're also on SoundCloud, YouTube, and iTunes. Thanks so much for listening. Signing off for Eric Pond, Brian Henry, Pete Mohan, and Pete Worth. I'm Mike Lavender. We'll talk to you soon here on the Real Chili Podcast.